Starting right off the bat with the book by Jesmyn Ward, Salvage the Bones, I want to talk about the tone that she used. So, the tone from my point of view that she used was a serious tone, and she used lots of usage of ominous, and she also used lots of like a dreamy type tone. So when I say ominous, I hope I'm saying that right, but when I say that, I mean she's setting up and building up for the use of irony throughout the story. And when I say dreamy, I'm saying how she basically throughout the story, she's telling us how she just dreams of Manny, how she dreams of him doing things to her, she dreams of him looking at her. So that's why I say dreamy. With her using the omniscient tone, it helps us as a reader build more of a relationship with the main character, Esh, as if she is almost telling us one on one what is going on. So we already know what's happening, but the rest of her family doesn't know. We already know about the pregnancy, we already know about her hooking up with Manny, but nobody else knows. With Jesmyn Ward setting up for the ironic moments throughout the book, she uses the meanwhile device, which basically tells two parts of the story at the same time. And she used that a lot throughout the beginning of the book, mainly, especially when she was just finding out that she was pregnant and she was going to the store, and then it flashed back to China giving birth. So all of this was happening at the same time. So she decided to tell those stories at the same time. She also used flashbacks quite often too, especially when she was flashing back to telling stories about her mother. Now, she didn't go into depth about her mother and her feelings about her mother, only because, as her being the only female in the family, she cannot seem weak. She cannot show her true emotions around her brothers, especially her father, because she will be seen as weak. Even when her mother first died, her father was like, "No, what are y'all doing? Don't show emotion." Now, another thing that was pretty ironic to me is how Shalia, I think I'm saying her name right, Manny's girlfriend, never suspected for Esh to be anybody that Manny was sleeping with. But then again, it was like her brothers kind of had some type of suspicion. Well, not even all her brothers. It was more like Skeeta had a suspicion that they were doing things together, but it was mainly his girlfriend that did not suspect for Esh to be sleeping with him. Another thing that Jesmyn Ward used throughout Savage the Bones was illusion. She used a great deal amount of illusion throughout this story, but I do want to narrow it down to one specific category, which was mythological illusion. And she talked about basically it was like references to the Bible. And I do remember reading in the back of the book, and she was saying how biblical myth is an integral to the spirits of the South in this heat and humidity. And also, she used mythological illusion when it came to the myth of Medea. She used that quite a bit throughout the story. She kind of said that Medea represents in somehow Esh. She represents Esh and also China. And somehow or another, I do want to say that she did use historical illusion too, since the book is based off of Hurricane Katrina, which is a drastic historical event that happened. Now, the type of diction that Jesmyn Ward was using throughout Salvage the Bones was more of an informal type diction, because she used common phrases and words that we use in everyday conversations. So it felt as if we were reading a diary almost, or if you was reading, you could probably visualize perfectly how everything was played out. Another thing, if we could just go back to irony, is how her father had mentioned that hurricanes with feminine names are the worst. And on page 124, he said, "The storm, it has a name now. Like the worst, she is a woman, Katrina." He's almost saying how women are just worse than men if it comes to that. But I see it as women are powerful, women are strong. That's why women and Mother Nature are hand in hand. Now, another thing that was ironic throughout the story was how in the beginning they did not take the storm serious. And at first they were like, "Oh, we had a storm years ago and it wasn't as bad, so this one's not going to be as bad." But the closer it got, the more they realized, wow, this storm is going to be worse than we thought, especially during the storm when they realized that the house started flooding and they had to get out because they didn't realize and then they think, "Oh, this storm is going to be this bad." They didn't believe it because especially the father, he was already going through him getting his fingers cut off. And also, he didn't realize until he started hearing on the news, "Oh, it's a category 5, which was already too late to leave. Now, it does say that her teacher, Miss Dudois, had mentioned how after the last big hurricane, people were too tired from finding their relatives' uprooted bodies and reburying them and sleeping on platforms and all that stuff. And it makes me realize how throughout the story, they didn't believe that the storm was going to be as bad as it was. But on our side of the book, we already know what's going to happen. So it's so like we're just waiting for the destruction to happen because we already know this is about to be a bad storm. Jesmyn Ward was connecting lots of things to the hurricane right before it hit, like the dogfight. It left a lot of destruction. It was more so to the dogs, but still it was lots of destruction. And also the brawl between all the guys at the basketball game, that was a destruction. So it's just like all these horrible things happening right before the hurricane hit was like a connection to the hurricane. The one last thing that I do want to mention about destruction is how she didn't realize how the way we realize is how Esh used nature characteristics to describe Manny. And later on, around chapter 10, I started to realize that Manny is her hurricane, her destruction. The last thing I wanted to touch bases on was, even though it's not something that we was assigned to talk about this week, I want to talk about it, and it was the theme. The theme that I got from this is just like based off of poverty and how the lower class are forced to survive without the help of the government. So like I noticed that the lower class had to work through pain and suffering to make sure that their houses were ready for Katrina, especially like the father when he was really sick, but he was trying to fight through it saying, "Oh, I have to get my house fixed," because he knows that he's not going to have any type of assistance from the government. Now, I did notice that in the book and in the When the Leaves Fall documentary, they said that if you choose to stay in your home and have not evacuated by this time, we are not responsible. You have been warned. And all of these could be the consequences of your actions. And that was on page 217. But it just makes you realize how the government has a downfall plan against the poor. It's ironic because you would think that the government is there to help and protect and serve the citizens, but it does the opposite. It's against the lower class.